All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Spoken Mirrors, Far from the Madding Crowd's interview series. And I'm blessed and excited to be joined by David Keenan. Hello.
Thanks very much, Ian.
Hi. Where are you calling from? Are you...
Glasgow.
Glasgow. Nice. And I need to know what plant is to your left.
There's so many. I mean, I'm living in a little mini jungle at the moment.
I love that.
I just bought a whole bunch of new plants as well. I mean, that's been one thing about lockdown is just that focusing on your own environment so much.
Totally.
So I'm getting in a sort of compulsive kind of plant buying regime at the moment, you know. So it's like sitting in a little mini jungle. And this is where I write. So I write surrounded by all these plants, which is really kind of cool.
It's like photosynthesis. It's all coming in.
I wonder, I mean, that's probably a better term, a better explanation for what I do than writing.
So, your latest novel is Christabeth? If I got that right. Extabeth.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I want to start with, if we're going to take that X as a crossroads, 4 paths. So, X is crucifix, X on a pirate map, the number 10. And then also your character Samuel, who gets in For the Good Times, who gets referred to as Samuel.
Samuel. Yeah, wow,
well.
You know what? That's a good... I'd totally forgotten about that, Ian, until you just reminded me of that there.
Because you mentioned that the name kind of dropped spontaneously, ex nihilo style.
Yep.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. I've discovered recently, because... You know, I've written a lot of novels that have never been published and that no one's ever read. And I don't have a great memory of all of them either, to be honest with you. And just going through my hard drive the other day, just looking for something, I discovered another novel in which Extabeth manifests. But Extabeth only manifests in this novel, I think, in a single sentence. But the word Extabeth is there. So it does make me feel, you know, that Philip K. Dick term, divine invasion. It feels like I've been sort of the subject to a sort of a slow motion divine invasion over time by Extabeth, also by another character called Paimon. But I know who Paimon is because Paimon's a goetic demon.
Yes.
And Paimon is a goetic demon that I asked to help me write a book, so I'm not surprised that he keeps showing up. But Extabeth seems much more of a sort of a spontaneous birth.
And does Extabeth have, is that more if Paimon had more of a distinct personality, has Extabeth got any kind of attributes as well, the one that was speaking through you?
Well, in Extabeth, what she seems to do is when she fulfills someone, she disappears them. And I realised that this is a theme running through my books a little bit as well, because I realised that Lucas Black's last words in his journal when he kills himself were complete contentment. So it was almost like coming to this point of where your life sort of has spoken. And you found your true name. I think there's an idea that you find your true name out there. And this is an idea I go back to with Tarot. You find your true name out there, not really in here. In other words, your true name is given you by the universe according to what happens to you. But the secret is you never fully know your true name because the final spelling is given by your death. So you never really fully know your true name. And I became interested in these ideas as well, that names can somehow be spoken in life through actions. Actions can speak names. So then I began to think, what does Extabeth do? Well, she fulfills and disappears, but she also seems to be the protector of women and girls. And she kind of says that when she fully manifests textually, she kind of has this weird note, and I haven't unravelled a lot of this myself. I'm working through this myself, but she does seem to have a few hints when she manifests fully. She talks about something about the birth process that occurs to me. She talks about yonder canal, un and up. It seems to be talking about some kind of like weird birthing or this constant sort of karmic wheel of birth and death. But she sort of enjoins the girls and women not to stand in fear. You know what I mean? Not to stand in fear, but to see their own names spoken in their kind of existence. So this is just a beginning for me of sort of pulling apart what Extabeth does. But I think what Extabeth also does is, and this is the thing I want to do with the book, is the book is Extabeth manifesting in your life when you read Extabeth.
Mm-hmm.
So what Extabeth does is, I think she develops a very quite intense relationship with the reader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, separate of me or any intention I had. I have my own relationship with her when I read her. And I'm getting these reports again and again from people who read it, that like there's an uncanny feeling that it gets under your skin. That like when Kim Gordon says it said read me, it said read me as if it spoke like an entity. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what my experience of was writing it, and that's how I hoped they would come across, that the reader enters in the kind of a powerful communing with this entity known as Extabeth in the book. A lot of people have then told me they've experienced strange coincidences or odd things have happened to them, weird synchronicities, which of course there's essays in the book about these ideas as well, because as well as the telling of Extabeth, I wanted you to literally experience experiences that could be associated with the book. So we talk about synchronicity and we talk about memory. One of my favourite ones is when we're talking about how a memory is made. And one of the girls is talking about one of her memories made in one of her essays. And she has this amazing thing where, and I remember when it was writing, I was hearing it being spoken and I had an uncanny feeling, because she talks about the mechanics, the dendrites, and how, and literally how biologically how memory is formed.
Mm-hmm.
And while she's telling you that, she's implanting a memory. She implants a memory of a man standing in the sea in St Andrews, possibly David W. Keenan, it seems to me. And she says at one point, it's like he's alive in here. You'll remember this man to this day. And so the book kind of demonstrates how memory is formed by forming memories in real time while you read it. And that seems to me, again, part of its uncanny, organic entity aspect.
So it's, it definitely seems like, well, do you feel it's because to me it feels like a very significant either progression or break from the first two that you did, first two novels that have been published even. With this is Memorial Device and For the Good Times, this definitely feels because you recently said stories are overrated and that you prefer the idea of the experience and the sort of the character and those.
Well, it's not even that I don't like stories. I mean, I do love a story, but a story alone is of no interest.
Yes.
If you tell me what a book is about, well, I don't really care. I don't care what the book is about. That's never going to convince me to read it. I need to know the sort of energy that's applied. I need to know what this person can do with rhythm and text and language. I want to know this person's ability as a magician with text. Can they literally transport objects across space and time? And that's going beyond describing. I don't mean can they describe it. If you're describing, if you either have to transmit that object, or if you get caught up in adjectives or over-describing, then all the reader is listening to is you describing something.
Yes.
You're not delivering the thing in itself. That was a big thing for me, to go beyond describing and get into the thing in itself. And I couldn't agree more that Extabeth I feel is a major book for me, and yes, is a major step beyond. I totally agree. I love Memorial Device and For the Good Times. But the thing that I think differs from them, and why it feels more uncanny for me, is that I always knew I would write Memorial Device and For the Good Times. I had no fucking idea I would ever write Extabeth, because I don't really see how you could formulate the idea of writing Extabeth. The more I think about it, is I could never have thought that up. The idea of Extabeth, even how it's structured, all the different things coming together, I mean, some of it still perplexes me. I don't think there's any way I could have sat down and planned that book out that way. But that's exactly how I know that book wanted to be, because I had a feeling at the end where I was like, this is complete, this is alive, this is what it wants to be. It's a shorter book than I would even write. The sentences are very different. I mean, my first two books, I was really into that rapturous, and Memorial Device was a sentence that almost like a chapter, basically, and I love those rapturous unfolding lines in a way that maybe that's a more natural way for me to write, because it's kind of how I talk, it's rolling sentences. But Anna Leah, when she began speaking, and it was definitely a case of listening to Anna Leah, that was how she spoke. And I think I've got good now that I can listen to inflection, and I realise that she never, ever raised her voice at the end of a sentence as if she was asking a question. She never questioned. She had a very open, naive faith to her. So I began to realise that to be true to her syntactically, I had to get rid of question marks. And then I realised I had to get rid of commas, because they were just all statements, sometimes statements of wonder, sometimes really inappropriate statements as well. And I find she was really funny with it also. But what was happening was I realised I was writing a book that hadn't been preconceived, that had no point to it whatsoever. And I'm a lifelong fan of William Blake. I've gone back to Blake a lot in this past year or so, a lot. And Blake is unfathomable. You cannot solve William Blake. You can't get to the bottom of him. And also his characters morph so much and they become different things. And I hate all this people who analyse Blake. They're like, well, Ariel stands for blah, blah, blah. Or like, loss, it stands for blah, blah, blah. They don't stand. Loss is loss. Loss is... He is. He's alive. He is not standing in for a point. And that's one thing I've always believed in myself as a writer. Characters do not stand in for points. Never, ever, ever. Characters never become ciphers. You can't allow that. As soon as you do that, they're dead. They're no longer alive, So it was. I realised that to have a book solved, well, you're never going to go back and read that. That book's been solved. And these are books that have got points. The books make the point. Okay, got that point. Never need to read that book again. That's what it was about. Yeah. But Blake, you can go on reading forever. It's an endless source of kind of energy because it is a kind of energy construct. And I found with Extabeth that I was starting to understand how to write these energy constructs or how to make energy constructs so that they stayed alive. They were unfathomable, but they somehow interacted with as almost like organic life or like an entity or something like that. And I began to realise we're getting back to basic word magic here. We're getting back to the magic of writing and literature and storytelling, but words most of all, the alchemy of words. And that is something that most literature is fucking forgotten about. If you read most books or hear people talk to most authors, it's almost like they've forgotten that they're working a form of high magic in a way, They're just telling a story, Everybody's got a story. Most of them are really, really dull and can't be told well. It's how you tell them. How do you tell a story? How do you tell with energy so much that you transmit that energy to the reader, that you make the book seem like a living thing that they're communing with?
Totally.
It's possible.
Well, I mean, one of your characters in This Is Memorial Device says, social commentary is not art to me, which feels kind of definitely along those lines. Yeah. I mean, the notion of pure language is really interesting because, I mean, I saw you... And this is a point I would agree with you on, is the idea of the idea of a book being is what it is, autonomous as it were, is very of the modernists of like Ulysses or Woolf, I would say.
All that shit, yeah.
Yeah. And then you were talking about and then obviously there was the critique to that, right? The postmodernist is one way to frame it, which you would then sort of discredit yourself away from. So is this... But
I don't believe... I have no interest in postmodernism or irony or anything like that. It does not interest me. I go back to that Jack Kerouac line, I want to be sincere.
For sure. Well, that's definitely... It's really interesting because that's definitely the trend that has been going on in the 21st century. And it definitely seems... At least from my perspective, it seems that I wrote a dissertation on the whole topic, but it seems that we know that there's limits to critique, and so we're kind of it's going back to that re-acceptance of those kind of ambitions, I guess, because go on.
Well, I mean, I don't believe in this idea of that you were talking earlier on about that modernist thing that of books being autonomous. I actually, weirdly enough, I don't agree with that. I think they can have a certain form of autonomy, but I believe there's a literary subterranean, and I believe that there are access points in and out of literature through all of these books, and I believe there are echoes. Not only do I believe there are echoes, I believe there are tunnels. I believe there are textual tunnels that link books together. And I believe you can access these using experimental syntax. I think you can use it using echoes. I think you can use mirrors. And I think sometimes I will use like a little line from another book, and not even identifiably a line, maybe a run of 4 words in a sentence of my own, and I will consider that like a wormhole that opens on to another book. And not only does it open on other books, all of my books that I write open on to the other books. And there are ways of ingression into the text and of coming out of the text in another book at certain points. I mean, I deliberately plot ingress points to all of my books and to other books so that I become part of... Well, and it's not on the surface, that's what I mean. There is a literary subterranean. It's like the tunnels are set down there. They have verse of the Tree of Life, and you go down there with your certain textual signs, echoes or mirrors, and then you can pop up in some other text or book. I mean, this is something that fascinates me. I mean, that's why I like the wee basic bracket that I use quite a lot. I even use it for the good thing. That's ingress to me. That's ingress. There's one bit in For the Good Times where they're parting this sea of flesh. It's during a massacre in a pub, and they're parting this sea to get through the other side, and he begins to part these brackets. It's like he's literally coming through the text or into the text, and that began to fascinate me again and again. So my next novel, which is called Monument Maker, which is the most ambitious thing I've ever attempted, is a huge book. That happens a lot. There is textual ins and outs through that whole book. There's an overall arc, there's linking stories, and then it's wormholes. It's littered with wormholes. In fact, it's all about wormholes. And actually, what starts happening is the characters themselves access the wormholes and begin to rewrite the text in real time. So again, I'm pushing further this thing is alive.
Yes.
But part of its life does come from its umbilical to other texts, you know?
No, totally. I mean, well, let's talk about Ulysses, because, I mean, in terms of For the Good Times, for example, is very much, you've talked about the oral tradition of, you know, when you were growing up and hearing stories of your family. I mean, I would say, you know, Molly Bloom in Ulysses is very much Ulysses trying to Joyce exhausting language, or and that's almost like that full long 70-page sentence is almost the climax of that kind of pure language again. So I mean, like, was that ever, well, maybe not consciously in your mind, but is that sort of, and I mean, as well as Ulysses, if you're talking about that sounds really interesting, the idea of a monument maker. I mean, was the ambition of something like Ulysses in mind, even if subconsciously?
Yeah, well, my first response to that is I'm just going to stoke my fire because I just think this log's dying down.
That's okay.
I mean, was it consciously on my mind? No way. No way was I thinking about it consciously when I first became a writer or anything like that. No way. Although Joyce was, I'm a huge fan of Joyce, and reading Portrait of the Artist as a young man in the library of Caldervale High School was a completely mind-blowing experience, unforgettable, and definitely one of these books that set you on the path, and I love that Joyce is affirmative nature. But then I began to realise as I became a writer myself, yes, I understand it viscerally. I do want to write my way through language. I want to write my way through language completely. I want to write my way into life. You know, I talk about Rimbaud a lot, being the most successful poet, because he cured himself of the need of he cured himself of poetry, cured himself of literature, so young.
Yeah, and I know.
Become caught up in this. Like, I am caught up in it. I do feel like it's the demons. I have no rest. It's very hard to stop writing. It's mad, and I realise that I have a responsibility when this is happening to keep writing. But I do keep hoping that I can write myself through the other side and out into life, where you almost cure yourself of language, because, you know, that buzz thing about language being a virus, people take that lightly. But when you really think about what Burroughs means by that, it's absolutely terrifying. What he means is that we have caught language and that there is no cure. There is no cure for language. It's a virus that we have caught and we can't go back. And I find that quite terrifying in a way, you know? But so I would like to get to the point. I think identity is a huge thing that gets in the way of people experiencing life. People always define themselves as a certain thing, and that means that their life should go a certain way, or they do certain things and don't do certain things. Go to these places, don't go to these places. And I think identifying with yourself as a certain person cuts you off from that. And that's been a huge thing in my life. I was always into like underground culture and left field stuff and things like that. But I began to realise that to really be a magician, you need a degree of invisibility. In other words, you need to be able to blend into any situation whatsoever so you can see the full bounty of the world and embrace all of it, rather than saying my identity cuts me off from that expression of it, you know? So this is why I always think that people who are kind of like, you know, the first rule of magic is invisibility. So when you walk about wearing a big cloak and your big staff and you're dressed like Merlin or something, do you know what I mean? It's not very magical, mate. You know, you're not very invisible there. And so hand in hand with that, with my continued personal project of... how would I put it? Of seeing myself out there, of not identifying myself as a little unit separate from everything that's going on. That's definitely part of a personal, spiritual thing for me. But I think it was the books that helped me do that. I began to write myself out of language. And I think this has been a really big project for a lot of writers, 20th century especially. I mean, Clarice Lispector, who is my absolute guiding spirit, I go Aviva, her book is a holy book for me. And I feel euphoric, truly euphoric when I read her books. And we've come to similar conclusions that have been uncanny, because in several books of mine, and this is before I'd ever read Clarissa, I would always say the only word you can trust truly is. I kept realising that the act of faith, that faith was involved with the word is. It was a true word you can trust. And then in one of her books, Clara says exactly the same thing. She says something like is the only word you can trust. And I feel as if we're both going for this immediacy of experience. We're trying to get rid of this little sort of what do you call the thing that gets in an intermediary? We're trying to get rid of that intermediary and have just direct communion between the book and the voice of the book and the person receiving it. I think that's what we're both getting at that point as well. And to make it happen in our own lives, where we go beyond identity, we do not name things as, or even as good or bad or desirable or undesirable. You know, we regard all of them as gifts, and we regard all of them as the speaking of our own name in time, over time. You know, call it an R syllable, call it our constant, whatever, you know what I mean? To get to that point, but it's to go beyond naming. Can you do that? Can you do that with text? I mean, and maybe like my attempt is to go beyond points, and I'm not sure if I'm going beyond stories though. So that's an interesting thing, because I still feel that some kind of allegiance to storytelling. That's why I like modernism, and I don't go so far into postmodernism. I have some kind of allegiance to that, because deep down I think there is, and this is the confusion, I guess, or maybe the energy that fires my books, is that, I mean, partly I understand that the nature of stories' ability to redeem reality, and I understand why we need them. We absolutely need stories, you know? The stories are stories. They are fictions. We need to remember that at the same time. And so I always think of how my dad and my uncle survived the Troubles and life in Belfast, and it was stories. It was fucking stories. They would come over and they'd tell these stories, and they would sound like it was the funniest thing ever. A guy just got fucking kneecap. You know what I mean? They're telling a story and they're pissing themselves laughing. They tried to steal a car and they fucking turned up at his door and they took him around the back, and we had to hear the excuse he came out with. But they would also tell it in such an incredible way. Amazing language, making ridiculous claims, stopping off for a bit of song and a quick joke and a movie. They would perform these stories. And even as a kid, I could see how they were redeeming their own reality for stories. And I always think of redeeming when, you know, when you take a bottle of ginger back to the shop and you get 10p for it. That's what I mean by redeeming as well. You know what I mean? You actually get some fucking, you get some gold back, you know? So these guys were literally alchemizing their own experience through storytelling and language. So I guess this is where I think the edge maybe I'm on at the moment is pointless curing of language, but also understanding the redemptive nature of storytelling and trying somehow to make these things work together. Because I mean, I don't think I write experimental novels. I mean, in a way I do, and I understand why Exodus is an experimental novel. It can definitely be read that way. But see, if you're not into experimental novels, you're not going to read any of my books and think, oh, for fuck's sake, this is like a weird art novel. And I know that because I talk to a lot of people who read it. And a lot of my readers do not come from the literary world even. Although I do align myself with modernism, and I do think of myself as experimenting. But I also think of my novels as very easy to read. I think if you're tripping up over a single section of one of my novels, I have failed in my rhythm or failed in my delivery of energy at that point. I've stumbled a little bit, I would say, if you ever feel like that, you know? Yeah.
Well, I mean, your work, I mean, it reminds me of Alan Warner in that sense, actually, who also gave you a quote for, this is a memorial device, I think, as well.
Memorial device, very generous, very early on. It was amazing of Alan, yes.
And, I mean, if I was going to parallel as well, this feels like, Exhibit feels like, your These Demented Lands. You know, These Demented Lands was the one where Alan Warner went, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I suppose, kind of moving on from that then, I suppose, well, first of all, would you say that your project then is one of, like, kenosis, you know, this divine self-emptying, if you're still kind of keeping an element, so it's not...
It's a lack of gnosis. My whole point is I don't think there's anything to be discovered. There's nothing to be uncovered. And I think that's one of the things that language convinces us that there's a point, that there's somewhere, that we're going somewhere. And this is a collective delusion that we've been handed down from religion, from Christianity, but also from political thinking, also like Marxism and things like this. They're all these kind of or fascism, totalitarianism. They're all these salvation theologies. They're always like, one point in the future, things will be good enough for us to be able to affirm existence. Until then, we have to be at war with it. But there is no end point to be reached. There is no such thing as becoming. There is only being. There is only right now. There is only your choice in this moment. This is the huge project for me, to get people away from the idea that there is an idea that will solve things for them. Because ideas beget ideas. And one of the things in Extabeth, again and again and again, is we question the nature of symbols and we see through them. Anna Leigh herself says, what happens after a symbol? A symbol. Where do symbols end? Symbols symbolize symbols. Words give way to words. Explanations give way to more explanations. There is no solid ground. And that's the place where epiphany happens. When you realize there is no solid ground, that's the moment of epiphany. You have nothing to hold on to. There is nothing to hold on. Literally. And I get this from writing. I also get it from, and I developed a profound faith. And it's a faith that does not require any answers and has no belief. I don't believe in anything. I literally don't believe in anything because I have faith. So I have no necessity to believe in anything. And nothing that happens will make me think, oh, well, that goes against my beliefs, or that makes me question my beliefs. Because it's a question of faith. And one of the ways I got faith is because I've tuned into this voice that writes these books with me, or alone, or however you want to talk about it. It comes when required. And it's been a long road, because I have been close to feeling myself quite mad over this because of the nature of the project that I've embarked on. But I've taught myself like coping strategies, mechanisms. Also, like, when you're a magician, you have the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, where after you've done your work, it's like psychic hygiene, something like that. Writers don't really have these techniques, and for a while, once I turned on this fucking insane uprising of voices and sounds and stories, it was impossible to stop or to hold them back. And I did have that classic mad feeling of voices in your head, countless voices in your head. Even Memorial Device, how many characters are in that? 50? You know what I mean? All of them competing for space, all of them talking constantly. So I had to have this rule that I began going on faith. I'm going to say, okay, when I sit down to write, what is going to come will come. And I won't hold on to anything round about that whatsoever, because that will be an act of faith that it will be there. But it will also give me a lot of fucking breathing space during the day when I'm not writing. Because so what happens now is I don't take any notes. I don't allow myself ever take a note. Ever, ever, ever. I don't really allow myself to have a single thought about any book I'm working on. And if I do feel a thought creeping up on me, I do. Not just now. If the thought is relevant and is weighted and works for the book, it will come back at the right time. If it doesn't, then it was wrong. So I very, very quickly shut down any internal debate about books or writing unless I am sitting down in front of this. And I've found that it works. It works. I've become better at listening, perhaps. Maybe that's it. But I have faith. I have faith that it works. And I've got to the point now where it does. And I have complete faith. And I know it works when it needs to work. And so I can kind of go about my day. But the faith comes as well in that it's not me. Ultimately, it's not me. It is not me writing these books. Now, if you write a sort of an average novel, or a novel with a point, or a critique, or type of novel, I understand it is probably you, and you probably wrote that, and I understand that. But I think that a lot of authors really kind of have a nerve sticking their name on their own book. I feel as if I almost do. I mean, can I really take the blame or the for I don't see how I didn't consciously write it. This book, this is how it wanted to exist. And it's an uncanny experience. And I did not know a lot of writers, a lot of people who wrote fiction. And I never went to a creative writing course or anything like that. I kind of basically taught myself. So I wasn't really sure what the experience of writing was like, or what it felt like when you put a novel together, or anything. I didn't get to talk to other novelists or anything like that. And so I had no idea. But then I feel my experience has been really different, because I don't really hear many novelists talking this way, and I don't understand why. Because it's made me question my very existence. It's made me question the existence of David Keenan, which is another thing that Extabeth is all about as well. I wanted to get myself out of the way as much as possible. So it's another David Keenan, but he's dead right at the start of the book. And then what happens, interestingly as well, is about 3/4 of the way through the book, when he throws himself off the tower, it seems like someone, a woman, a girl, removes the book from his pocket. Someone else takes control of that book in the final saying of Extabeth. And I suspect it's Anna Leah taking control of her own story through the blessing of Extabeth, who looks after women and girls. Because all these guys have been banging on about their own story the entire time. You know, getting upset about whether they're getting respected as a musician or on a talk show or what about their career. And Anna Leah the whole time gets overlooked or used or batted about by the professional golfer, by all these people. So I think Extabeth finally steps in and gives her the book, control of the book. And I think she tells the final chapter, Grace. You know, she lets David Keenan go through Grace.
Yeah. And, well, I'm really glad you mentioned Grace, because I was going to bring up Simon Day. He was like one of my favourite mystic, or Simon Wheel, I can never pronounce the name. It's one of my favourite, well, I mean, you know, part anarchist mystic, but also hated anarchism, kind of in the same way, talking about she was very critical of certain tendencies, I suppose, towards in that. And she obviously talks in Gravity and Grace about the allegory that's always haunted me, I guess, is the two prisoners communicating using knocks on a cell wall. And she compares that to God or to spirituality as that experience of communicating with, basically using the absence or the seeming absence as to make it present, I guess.
But for me, there's no absence.
Yes.
Silence is the voice. This has been the most uncanny thing for me. That, well, I mean, I guess it's the experience you have with even when you start to meditate a lot, and I've been meditating for many years, is that you just realise that things arise of their own accord. And then disappear of their own accord, you know? And this is what Extabeth is about as well. I mean, a lot of my books are about that, disappearing, arising and disappearing, and affirming that whole motion and seeing how beautiful it is. And now I've realised as well, books arise at a time and then disappear. All these things, that's the uncanny experience that I've been having. And if you kind of get to that point, then you realise that you can have peace from yourself. Because one of the biggest mistakes is to associate yourself with the thoughts in your head. And this experience of writing has taught me that these thoughts in my head are not me. It's not me. I'm the space where these thoughts take place, but it's not me. And I don't mistake myself for them anymore, which also means I can conveniently ignore them, you know? Or I can just say that thought rose up out of nowhere, it'll go nowhere. I don't need to act on it. I just say, well, here it goes, you know? But when I'm really ready to listen, I listen to the books coming up that way and I enjoy it. I love it. And you catch what I want to do. I catch them in their uprising, which is why I never take notes, which is why I never do structural drafts, which is why I never do plans, which I never do any of that. I read all my books start to finish with no plan, no forward planning or no idea. You know, and I even did that with Memorial Dyson for the good times. Although I had an idea what the book was about, I still wrote it back to finish without any plan or things like that. But it's got more extreme now that I don't really know what the book is about. And sometimes I think if the books are encoded in the first word. So the first word for me was Extabeth, you know, and then the first sentence comes and I'm like, okay, the whole book is in this first sentence. Let's unpack this. And it's just a sort of unpacking of this hyperdense sort of one word, one idea, this one appearance, you know.
So I'm curious as to how do you find I suppose the editing process once the manuscript is done, or how does that work for you, or how have your relationships been with editors, I guess?
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm lucky to be editor, Lee Brackstone, and I can't imagine how I could ever work with another editor. I can't imagine another editor buying Memorial device, like, you know, from somebody who never had an agent and who just ran a review of a book he'd edited and completely slaughtered it. You know, I mean, so there's a lot going against me at that point. I submitted it, I just asked him if he wanted to read it, and I mean, what an nerve. I mean, he did say when he signed me, I've got to be honest with you, mate. This is our first phone call. I've got to be honest with you, mate. When you sent that manuscript to me, I did think, who the fuck does this cunt think he is? You know? But then that's when the best friendships happen. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And that's really happened with me and Lee. I mean, it's incredible. We were absolutely meant to work together. We have a fucking psychic connection in terms of editorial work as much as anything else. I always joke that Lee Brackstone can read a book's mind, and he genuinely fucking can. And he will sometimes say the most outlandish shit, and you'll be like, really? And every time you follow up, he was right every time. It's amazing. Another thing about it is Lee is not an editor who's ever tried to rein me in.
Sure.
In fact, Lee's an editor who has pushed me harder. Every single editor on every single book, there's come a point where Lee's like, push it. You know what I mean? Sometimes he has these absolute amazing structural breakthroughs, or sometimes he'll have the name and stuff like this. But it's always about pushing harder. Really, mainly in terms of that, pushing the language harder, see if we can bring it through even more structural, organisational, title, all this stuff. Just visioning it completely. So we bat it back and forth in terms of that. What he'll do, I'll send in the draft. He'll normally go through it, send out this massive, big, long, sort of enthused, intuitive thing about it. I'll go back, a month later, deliver the thing. We're basically ready to go to copy edit. You know what I mean? That's what it's been like with all 3 books. But I think I'm very, very lucky to have a relationship with Lee Brackstone. I can't imagine many other editors being able to work on these books or having that passion and belief in them when I was completely an unproven. I mean, yeah, now fine, but when I was an unproven writer, no, I don't think anyone would have been taking chances on these types of books. But then, cynical me, one of the reasons I didn't submit these books, one, because I just was writing and I thought it was better to write than worry about publication, which I did for like over a decade. I didn't know how to get an agent or anything like that. But so the most important thing was just really the working and stuff like this. But I imagined, I was like, most editors today are square. It's not like the 60s and 70s when it was really countercultural and there was all these rock and roll editors living large and promoting mad experimental literature. I was like, there's nobody really like that anymore. But I was so wrong because Lee Braxton is exactly that. And these books were meant to be really 100%. And wouldn't exist as they are without them. So I've been incredibly lucky. I have a brilliant editorial relationship. And I always wanted to have an editor. When I was writing, I wanted to have somebody to talk to about my books.
Sure.
I wanted to get feedback. I didn't know any authors. I was dying to have an editor. I really, really wanted somebody to say, by the way, let me give you some feedback on this mad shit. You know what I mean? Because it was over 10 years with nobody really even reading any of my manuscripts.
Yeah. And so you were writing for The Wire before that, if I got that right, and doing sort of music journalism work. When did that start then? Was that quite young, or?
I mean, yeah, I've been writing about music since I was like 16 years old. I mean, I published a fanzine when I was age 17 with a friend of mine from Bishop Briggs. It was called Firm and Fruity. And we interviewed like the Pastels, the Vaselines. It was a cool zine. I mean, we were writing about shit like Eric B and Rakim and a guy called Gerald and shit like that as well, and Pussy Galore and a lot of underground shit. I mean, I was always into the DIY aesthetic, and I always loved that. I just always loved getting the shit out there before the culture was even damn ready for it. And I include that with fucking Ulysses and shit like that, all private press stuff. Sometimes if you're ahead of the curve or it's just the culture hasn't caught up yet, you rely on DIY culture to get this shit out there just before everyone's ready for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And back at that time when I began going to like gigs and underground shows in Glasgow, it was a feeling you just had to get involved. You couldn't just be a bystander. You had to contribute something to the culture. It was an amazing feeling. So I was like, well, I want to write. I love to read. I'm going to write a zine. We self-published this zine and stuff like that. And then not long after that, when I was starting university, there was a magazine called Spiral Scratch, old sort of punk, post-punk, independent magazine. It was a cool wee zine, and I liked it. And I thought maybe this is a magazine that I might have a chance to be able to write for. Didn't shoot for any mere melody maker because I didn't think I was that good. And sure enough, they began sending me records to review. It was fucking amazing. I remember getting like 4 African Head Charge LPs in the post and just being like, this is the fucking best gig ever, And then I went on, then a guy who formed one called Spiral Scratch and a story called MX Press, and I began writing for that. Then I moved to London and began writing for Melody Maker, and then The Wire asked me to come and write for them after that, and it's just like that. I couldn't fucking believe it because I loved The Wire at the time. Back the way The Wire was then, I was like a huge fan of, and but I just didn't think I was smart enough to write for it, because just because of my background, I guess, and stuff like that. And when I read them, I just thought these people were so intelligent. So yeah, I'll never forget the day I got The Wire asked me if I'd. It was on my answering machine. I woke up in the morning. And I'd written some piece for Melody Maker about, it was a krautrock compilation and a compilation of underground Japanese psychedelia with Keiji Haino on it and stuff like that for the Melody Maker. And Tony Harrington left a message on my machine saying he really liked that piece and could I give him a call. I was like, oh my fucking God. That was amazing. Because when I got into underground music and I read Lester Bangs, 1987, I think, or is it 88, Psychotic Reactions and Carburetor Dung came out. And that's still in my top 10 books and one of the biggest influences on me, on my life, and as a writer was Lester Bangs, because he could write about rock music the way rock music sounded. He didn't betray it. It wasn't a big energy, going back to saying it wasn't about rock music. It was the energy of rock music. He was transmitting it completely. And so it wasn't about critique. I can't stand all that crap. It's a bunch of English lit students that don't know how to listen to music and they think they've got to analyse lyrics, you know what I mean? Like it's fucking Rudyard Kipling short stories or something. I hate all that crap. I wanted to develop a facility with language. It was more synesthetic. It was more like science fiction the way I was writing about music or stuff like that, because I wanted to transmit the same buzz, the same kind of energy. And I think back then it's when I began to realise the magic that you actually could. The energy could be transmitted through words and sentences, and it could be rational sentences, didn't need to be massively experimental, but you could transfer that energy across. Yeah. And that became my big project as a writer. But I mean, I've done that now. I can't ever see myself really writing. I don't write for the wire anymore, and I can't imagine writing about music anymore. I'm back to being a fan of music, really. You know.
Did you ever bump into like the what are they called, Cyber Culture Research Unit, and like Nick Land and all that in Warwick, the sort of theory fiction movement? Because he was like a philosopher at Warwick, but that group of people would basically go to nightclubs, take a bunch of amphetamines, and then write essays on the nightclub floor while listening to very intense like trance or techno, and then eventually he published them as...
But that's the opposite of me, man. I wanted just to be, I'll be off my head on MDMA or whatever, but I ain't going to be taking notes. You know what I mean? My whole point was I didn't want to be the guy scribbling like notes down, you know what I mean? For I wanted to be the guy who was in the mosh pit or, you know. I know what you're talking about. It's a certain type of music journalism as well that it just never really appealed to me. It was a one step removed, I felt. It was a lot of squares who can't really dance, writing about dance music, which really, it's nonsense. You know what I mean? These are guys that just don't get down. Yeah. You know, and I was always about getting down. I don't care about comparing notes afterwards.
For sure. Have you ever heard of the other one that came to mind? I've been really fascinated with the transcendental black metal band Liturgy. Have you heard of it?
I've never checked out Liturgy at all.
Really? Oh, yeah. But
why? What's so interesting about it?
Well, so the front woman is Hunter Hunt Hendricks, and she recently came out as trans, and she's also been started to do a YouTube series of her theology, basically, which is kind of a syncretic sort of mixture of the Kabbalah, and she wrote a black metal opera called Origin of the Alimonies, which I think ran for like 2 nights like last year, and that's coming out as an album version. She's just started to upload YouTube videos of her speaking about her thinking, and that's it. Now I remember, one of the centers of it is the notion, part speculative, part not, of that God made a third covenant with William Blake, and that the spirituality, or the spiritual mission, as it were, or quote unquote mission, was kind of transferred to the arts and culture and emancipatory movements thereafter for the 17th century, and that's kind of where Hunter bases her.
I love that idea. I love that idea. I think it's fantastic. Well, I mean, I totally agree with art. Art is the high magic, because I always say to people, like, you know, well, do you believe in magic? And they're like, no. And they're like, well, do you believe in art? And I'm like, well, do you believe in the power of this thing we give this name to, this incarnate entity, this thing that doesn't seem to have any physical existence whatsoever, and yet we make huge claims, and we know for sure that it transforms our life, that it is that you enter into a transformative relationship with art. Now, you're talking about art at that point as the name of an angel's. Basically, you're entering into communion with art, capital A, like Extabeth, in a way, and that transforms your life. Well, that's true. It does. So that sounds like magic to me. If you believe in art, if you believe in the transformative power of art, you believe in magic.
Let's talk about maybe sort of I've completely lost track of the time, but maybe to sort of finish up, talk about the tarot deck that you co-created. So what was it called? Remind me.
Oh, the autonomic tarot.
There we go. Oh wow, nice. So how did that project come around? And
I mean, I'm really, really interested in tarot. I can't imagine how any writer or storyteller really isn't, because essentially it's the art of storytelling. What you do is you get these images, these repeating archetypal images in a certain pattern, and then you create a story from them. It's so fucking amazing. I mean, I love it, and I've had so many genuinely magical experiences. But my definition of magic is not any kind of... I mean, I'm a Taurus, and so I'm earthy, and I'm very suspicious of overly airy-fairy bullshit. Really quite grounded. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, even, which is kind of... People talk about he's being mystic or supernatural. I don't have any of these beliefs. at all. I don't believe in any of this crap. For me, how does tarot work? Well, my inspiration for tarot comes from poetry. Absolutely, poetry. Because again, I think they're at the forefront of what we've been talking about, a lot of poetry, especially of curing yourself of language or going beyond language or making language sort of so transparent that you see the isness behind it. And Charles Olson, who I love, Charles Olson, lifetime reader of Olson, lifetime student, again, unfathomable. There's no bottom to Charles Olson. You live with him for life, and that's it, basically. But Olson talked about how it's a really straightforward thing. He says, whatever happens in this moment has the character of this moment. Now, that's just an undeniable truism that doesn't require any supernatural belief whatsoever. We can accept that that's true. Whatever happens this moment is the character of this moment. Okay, well, if we have a repeating grammar that we can apply to this moment, then we can read the character of the moment. And that's what we're doing. I don't believe tarot is predictive. When people say to me, well, you said that and never happened. No, I don't. It's not predictive. But what we can do is we can deal with the possibilities of the moment in a way which we articulate. We'll articulate them a little more because we're always dealing with the possibilities of the moment. You walk into a room, you're immediately sizing up. You get a new group of people, you're reading the room, you're reading the relationship, you're seeing what's going on. Everyone's reading the moment for its next revelation. What will the moment provide next? Everyone's doing that. Well, here's a way we can do it using a sort of repeating grammar of archetypes. And then what we do is then we create a story through that, So it's about possibility. It's about sounding the possibility. But there's been so many uncanny moments of synchronicity, which again, the best is about pronouncing it synchronicity rather than mere only a coincidence. There's that essay in the Best where they talk about the difference between synchronicity and coincidence. Only a coincidence means to sort of like devalue experience, to say there is no magic. There was nothing inherently beautiful in that. Two things just happened to cross at the same moment. Whereas you can take it the other way and say synchronicity bestows a magic in the moment. To say there was meaning in the crossing. There was meaning in the mutual rising up at this moment. And of course there is. It can be read for that, So that's how tarot works for me. And it's been an incredible experience doing it with other people because I do it at festivals and sometimes you'll do you can do I don't know. What's the most I've ever done? Maybe 30 readings in one sitting or something like that. And it gets pretty intense but what happens is you end up having a really, really intimate conversation with a stranger immediately. Immediately. As soon as those cards are out, immediately. And what I tend to do is I never, ever, ever do cold read. It's never about impressing or showing what you're good at the cards. What I always say is I will read what these cards mean to me in this order. And then you can say what you think about that. You know what I mean? So I basically start doing that. But even that, and people become so emotional, it's so intense, it is beautiful. And again, we're going back to how we redeem our lives through storytelling. There was something beautifully redemptive about a tarot spread. And another thing is because it allows people to give up a little bit of responsibility for themselves, which is a beautiful thing to take off somebody's shoulders, And this is the thing, because you get in this neurotic thing, you're stuck up in your own head that you're the thing generating everything. Everything is generated by you. This punishable you, this guilty you, this you that's generating some bad stuff, But even tarot, because it's archetypal situations going on again and again and again, you realise that you're rising up as your own part in this experience that all humans have. And all the tarot cards are experiences that all humans go through at some point in their life in different combinations. And waking up to that and seeing yourself walking in that sort of in this archetypal place is beautiful and a source of incredible strength. I remember when my father died and I was really struggling with it. And the first time I had to go and visit his grave, I remember my friend, the writer Biba Kopf, who I wrote with The Wire, he called me and I was like, look, I'm still on my way out. I'm going to cycle out to the cemetery because it's outside of Glasgow, so it's quite far away. And I don't have a car. I was like, I'm going to cycle to my dad's grave for the first time. And I was staying there and I'm feeling really upset about it. And Chris said, well, just think, you're doing something that human beings have been doing since the beginning of time. And this is the moment you're doing that. And it is amazing. And there is a solace in that and a strength in that. And it comes from stories, but also just inserting yourself into archetypal human situations. And I've had so many beautiful situations reading people's cards, people crying, people laughing, people people getting married straight after. I mean, I read when I was in Carcassonne at Convenanza with Andrew Weatherall and my editor Lee, and I was doing readings at the castle there, and it was just such a beautiful vibe, and so many beautiful people around Andrew Weatherall, and I was reading at Hotel de la Cité overlooking the old town, and I did a reading for this woman and a reading for this guy, and I guess they were together, and the readings were amazing. Really, and they had a lot in common. I didn't really know what was going on with it. And the next day, he told me that he asked her to marry him after the readings, and that was just, I mean, it's fucking amazing.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
I mean, you know, it's just amazing. And sometimes, a lot of times, also when you're reading, one thing I've realised when I'm reading tarot on it is that everyone is looking, most people who ask for a tarot reading are looking for permission for something, often, you know? And in a way, you come to a tarot reading when you're moving into another season of your life, when you can feel these archetypal forces welling up in yourself often, and you almost feel the change. You feel, you know, like weather coming on or someone dying or something like that. You feel it ahead of before it's even rationalised. You feel this beginning of a new season. And tarot attracts people when they're feeling that they're somehow, the archetypes are acting through them at certain points. And often they're just looking for permission to allow the archetypes to exist, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating. As a writer, for a writer just to have these incredible intimate one-on-ones with strangers constantly through tarot, it's been amazing. Totally amazing.
Well, can I ask for a reading tonight? I don't know if you'd be willing to do that, or I don't know if it's weird to do that recorded.
If I did a full reading, it would take quite a while. But what we could just do is, why don't we just do like, hold on, let me just take this deck out. What we'll do is we'll do a quick wee 3-card thing, right?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
I always think that works quite well. And it's interesting as well because this is a new deck now, so I've never used this deck before, because my old deck, which I've used for every single other reading, weirdly enough, and I don't know what's going on here, the High Priestess is missing.
Wow.
I only noticed that other night when I went through it. So it's come to its end with the departure of the High Priestess, and I can't help but think,
is that Extabeth?
It's tied up with Extabeth. This has departed my tarot deck that I've used for reading since this deck existed, and I don't know when she could have gone, because she was in the last readings I was doing, but she's gone. Couldn't believe it. So I had a new deck. I was like, I'm gonna have to start using a new deck. So what we'll do is I'm gonna quite extensively shuffle this, and I'll give you the little sort of spiel that I kind of give to people before I'm doing a reading. Say it's not predictive. Doesn't mean anything's going to happen in any way whatsoever. What we're doing is, as I said, we're sounding the potential of the moment. And normally I give them options. I say, because some people really have something on their mind and they want to ask you something. So often what I'll do is I'll say, you can ask me a certain question. You can point me to, you know, like an area that's on your mind, or you can just get a completely cold reading. And most people inevitably will say a cold reading, and I like that best as well, because I'm just basically going to describe the cards. So I think what we'll do is I'm just going to keep doing this for a little bit, and then I'm going to bring you in a wee minute. I want to just make sure that they're efficiently shuffled. Okay, so I'll just keep doing this for a little bit, right? And you just tell me when you think the cards are ready. We'll do that. See, I'm really rubbish at shuffling, but I always say to people, it's not about skill or technique, it's just about the moment.
Okay, ready?
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how are we going to do this? Because... Okay, I'm going to do left to right, but I'll face it with you so you can see, and then I'll turn it around and read it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, first on the left is Discs Daring. The left means these are sort of nagging things. There's no positive or negative. These things are maybe nagging, holding back. Then we'll have the central question, and then we'll have the energy, which will be the following. So the central question here, the moon. That's a beautiful card, the moon. I really like that a lot. There's so much going on in that. And then we'll get the third card here, which is... Oh, wow. Well, look at that. That's my favourite card. I actually have an original of this on the wall, Sophie's original, hanging above my desk here. So we've got daring, the moon, and the star. Well, this is a pretty interesting spread. Straight off my head, I'm going to say this is a spread that is talking about perhaps something to do with birth. It doesn't mean literal birth, but it means giving birth to something new, perhaps a new phase, stepping forward, doing something else, moving into a new phase of your life, taking on a sort of new persona. Because what's nagging here is discs daring. And this often means the ability to sort of earth things, to make things happen for you a little bit more, to maybe come more down harder on the side of what you want and to make that an actual part of your life. The central card is the moon. The moon is about inspiration, dreams, often obviously lunacy as well, but that's part of the dreams thing. But I love the way that Sophie does it there, because if you can see it, I always think that the moon's face is kind of like fallopian tubes, you know, and seems to be crying menstrual blood into a sea, just something that gives birth, and these spumes either side as well. So I always think that card is about literally following your dreams card, with like birthing things that are more in tune with perhaps you and your own reality. And this is the positive card. This is the energetic card. Honestly, there's no better card. I'll just describe this card. So it's in an energetic position. So this is the positive energy for you right now. But if you look at it, for a start, she's got little manacles on. She's broken the chains, but there's still manacles, so she's not completely free. There's still chains there, and she's on this geometric structure, very fixed form. She's got a mask of stars, but it seems to me that how can she see out of that? Well, she obviously can, but it's a little bit of a fake it till you feel it. Wear that mask of stars, while you literally follow your own star here, and then you take this one little dip, this tiny toe in the water from this geometric construction into these waves, and all it takes is to fake it enough like that and put your first toe in, and then allow yourself to be carried away on those waves. So that's how I would read those three little cards right now.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Also, it's been great for me because me and Sophie designed this deck together. I mean, it's so much personal resonance. You know what I mean? For me, I mean, I really feel these cards so much, and I've read them in so many different situations. You just get to kind of know them again, like entities. You know, again, it's going back to Extabeth. It's these things that speak, these kind of like accumulations of image, word that become energies, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful place to come to an end for the conversation. David, thank you so much for willing to chat to me tonight. I know you've been busy with as busy as can be during a pandemic, but
it's just busier in a way, because you're at home, everyone knows you're available, and you're got to battle stuff out constantly rather than just turn up and talk about it. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. But no, I really appreciate it, and yeah, thank you.